Welcome today to a webinar on your 5 keys to your best automated testing strategy. This is Danielle Papermaster with SOSTA, and today's webinar is with Propelix and SOSTA on your mobile testing automation strategy. To kick off, I would like to take a quick poll of everyone on today's webinar. If you could just fill out what your role is in your organization, that'd be great. We'll give a second for everyone to answer. Okay, great. So just a quick poll. It looks like most people are testers on this call right now. All right, so we're going to get ready to kick off. To give a background, we'll start with what Propelix does. They create mobile strategies for world-class apps for the enterprise. They're 100% focused on digital and mobile for clients. They have a 15-year track record, founded in 2011, and have offices in San Jose, Boston, Pittsburgh, and Guadalajara, trusted by many name brands that we all know. And SOSTA, if you're not familiar, we deliver performance for industry leaders. We do functional testing for mobile and web, and performance testing for mobile and web, as well as real user monitoring. To go into a little bit of background of our presenters today, we'll start with Shahab Chowdhury, and he is with Propelix. He's been in the industry for about 20 years now, and has advised several startups, smaller startups, and then Fortune 500 companies as well, and a trusted advisor, as well as speaks in the industry. And we have Tom Savez with SOSTA. He's a product evangelist. Worked at many of the companies we all know in the Silicon Valley over the past couple decades as well: Apple, Sun, Palm, Source, Intuit as the latest. And you can also find him at many conferences for performance and mobile testing as well around the United States. So I'm going to pass it off to Shahab now. And if you don't mind taking over, Shahab.
That's great. Thank you for that introduction, Danielle. And as we start our discussion today, I wanted to start off with this question that gets asked quite a bit in our engagements with our customers. And I would say more and more so now, as mobile has become a bigger and bigger part of what people are working on these days. And we think that part of the reason why this is the case is due to the fact that there are some realities related to mobile testing that companies are starting to face. And so I thought it would be worthwhile to set the context to go through those together and see if you are seeing something similar as to what we have observed in our customer base, as well as what we have been following in the industry. And so I have 5 realities to go through. The first one being that QA and testing have an impact on customer value and user experience and customer satisfaction. And that statement by itself is nothing new. What we're finding is new related to that is the fact that there's a one-to-one correlation now where testing and QA is now considered to have a direct impact on that. And that number, 76% of the executives interviewed, this is from the World Quality Report, found that the impact is one-to-one, and they deem the value associated with that to be important or very important. We think that's an important element to pay attention to. And the reason why we think that is the case now more than ever before is really this unforgiving user that we're now faced with. People with shorter and shorter attention spans are a little bit less forgiving of what could have in the past been something that they could have dealt with. The numbers associated with that unforgiving user really point to folks who are very, very quick to download the apps, but they're also very quick to delete. There's some metrics out there that point towards apps that are downloaded but never used. That's a very large number, 74%. 40% of the apps are deleted after first use if they don't meet their expectations. And when it comes to expectations, the performance of the app, the quality of the app, the user experience of the app are typically cited as the major aspects that lead to that dissatisfaction. 2 seconds as an average launch time for an app. We can have all the whiz-bang app functionality, but if it's not quick to perform what it's expected to do, people very, very quickly lose interest. And this is not only restricted to consumer-facing applications. I think a lot of this is true even in the enterprise space, where employee-facing apps, business partner apps also have the same considerations to keep in mind. And the reason for that, we think, is that it's the consumerization of enterprise applications, where these apps live on the same smartphone that the consumer apps are living on. And so the expectation is that 2 apps sitting side by side should behave the same. It doesn't matter whether they're consumer-facing or they're internal applications. And that is a big change from how things used to be in the past, where enterprise applications sort of had a little bit of a get-out-of-jail-free card associated with them, which was through enough training, through enough incentives, through enough adoption exercises, people could get them to be adopted. That no longer is the case. The third reality, which is also understood by most, but perhaps these numbers help make the case even stronger, is the fact that over the last 3 years, we have seen a big movement towards the amount of time people are spending on mobile apps or on mobile devices in general is increasing. The chart on the left shows about a 58-minute increase from 2014 to 2015, which is about 35% more time spent than what we used to do on mobile devices even a year ago. We definitely notice it. We notice it in people around us, in our children. We notice it in business colleagues who are doing more and more of their work on mobile devices. Related to that, the other stat that is very interesting is the little chart on the right, as well as the time spent on browsers versus mobile apps. More and more of the time is being spent in apps, to the point of where 90% of the time spent on mobile devices is on apps. Whether those are gaming apps, whether those are utilities, whether those are productivity apps, business use apps, or whether they're true consumer apps, the fact that time being spent on apps by far outweighs what is being done in the browser is a reality that companies have to deal with in the way that these mobile apps are being tested. And later on, as we talk about what impacts do these realities have, I'll come back to the slide and talk about it a little bit more. The next reality has to do with the fact that now finally realizing that mobile is no longer one more aspect of your digital strategy. It is, in fact, in some cases, replacing a lot of what used to exist as part of your digital strategy. There is finally a realization that there should perhaps be a higher focus put on the QA and testing efforts related to mobile. The result of that is that, again, from the World Quality Report, this is latest and greatest data from 2015-2016 that points to the fact that 35% of the budget is focused on mobile solutions when it comes to new development that is being conducted in organizations. And that is a huge number, considering that the number of legacy systems that are in place already, considering all the BI and CRM systems that are in place, considering all the ERP back office solutions that the organizations have to continue to maintain, develop, and enhance. 35% of that budget for QA and testing, we focus on that, is a recognition of the fact that this is no longer something that can be done using traditional ways of conducting QA and testing. And so that the recognition there also points to investments in new tools, new techniques, new skill sets, training existing testing resources, starting to create testing center of excellence sort of organizations that are focused on mobile-first solutions is an important realization. And the last realization, which is requires a little bit of discussion, is the fact that we have been, as we have looked at what are some of the challenges that organizations are facing when it comes to mobile-specific testing. This slide, if you look at the bottom 5 elements of this, you will see that from 2013 to 2014 to 2015, the trend is generally in a positive direction, where more and more people are aware of what needs to happen, and so the numbers are shrinking and moving in the right direction. However, if you look at the first two aspects of this, they're very eye-opening in terms of not having an in-house testing environment, and more than anything else, the not having enough time to test what is being created as mobile solutions. And if you notice that 36% of respondents still feel that that's the biggest reason why they're unable to test mobile applications in the way they would like to. We think there's a lot of root cause discussion that needs to go on around that. We do think a big part of this is that if you try to test mobile applications using traditional techniques, you will very quickly run out of time. Mobile applications require more frequent updates. There's more devices to test on, and there's no way that traditional ways of approaching the budgets, the scope, will allow you to get in front of the mobile testing challenges. And so we think that's an important consideration, and wanted to use that as a way to get into can automation of testing processes be a component of how perhaps maybe this time, lack of time situation be addressed. And so that's part of what we're going to try and address in the next 5 considerations discussion. And so as per the title of our webinar today, I wanted to go over what are some of the things that we're seeing in our engagements that have allowed us to extract these 5 key considerations. So with that, let me jump right in. The first one has to do with the fact that a lot of organizations try to automate everything, and we think that that's a flaw in most testing methodologies out there that try to perhaps maybe look at a tool and say this tool will take over the entire testing related to our mobile applications. And we think that the key there is to understand when and what to automate in your mobile portfolio. So when it comes to a specific app, understanding what are some of your core test cases that have to be tested, without which the app cannot perhaps even move forward. Oftentimes we find that taking the entire test case portfolio, which includes your edge cases, negative testing, all those types of scenarios that are perhaps don't make up the core, are oftentimes included in the automation platform and the test cases that are ready to be automated. Likewise, perhaps identifying test cases related to an app that the rate of change associated with them is pretty low. The functionality has matured to a point where it is no longer going to change a lot. It is perhaps maybe the foundation of that app is typically a better way to start than to go after everything that is going to add to the rate of change that is already associated with mobile applications. Likewise, anything that is very simple and mundane task, we find in a lot of cases that people lose interest. Testers will, in a manual testing script, lose interest and will start to make errors in testing those. And so perhaps maybe those are good candidates to start with when it comes to the automation strategy around an app. Likewise, there are some test cases that are really not good candidates based on the functionality that is encapsulated in those test cases. If you're trying to do perhaps maybe for check deposits in a financial organization, if you're trying to do image capture, you can certainly test the camera functionality, but you cannot test how well that image was captured and processed and the text was recognized. So we see cases like that where companies have tried to do workarounds in those cases. You're perhaps in those cases better off just to leave those as manual tests that have to still be conducted. So the message from that key consideration really is automation is not something that has to be applied to the entire test suite for your app. If you switch gears and think a little bit about your entire portfolio of mobile apps, not all mobile apps are created equal. And keeping that in mind and understanding that identifying apps that perhaps have the highest impact by way of a large user base, or perhaps apps that are deployed on multiple devices and have to support users interacting with multiple devices, those apps traditionally typically make up good candidates for automation. So starting off with this type of a consideration, I think is important, and going in with a mindset that a subset of what you do today around your mobile portfolio, as well as within the mobile apps, a subset of the test cases are typically what you want to go after when it comes to automation. And just going through a little bit of a profile analysis on each app helps. These are the types of techniques we have been successful with, where we go through and profile using an app assessment framework that allows us to understand what are the different apps in the portfolio and what is the profile of each one of those apps is a good way to start, and we would recommend an exercise like this before you embark on the automation of an app. The second piece which helps with the prioritization is looking across your portfolio and doing this exercise where you try to create a mobile test automation roadmap, taking all the test cases associated with an app and going through an exercise where you're able to associate some level of a score across these 4 dimensions, and those being business criticality, value of automation, the automation readiness, and ease of automation. Using those 4 different areas to examine which test cases are good candidates for automation. And you'll see that from that we're able to compute an automation priority. And also notice that here, going along with the previous point that I was making, that there are some test cases that are really better off being tested in a manual way as well. So keeping that in mind, and what goes into those dimensions really is something that you can tailor to your organization. But I wanted to just share some of the typical considerations as to what goes into figuring out what is the business criticality of a test case. And ranking those on a high, medium, low scale, or a 1 to 5 or a 1 to 10 scale typically is a good exercise to go through. So I highly recommend it as something that you should start off with for each app that you're considering to automate is perhaps maybe a good place to start. The next consideration I wanted to talk about is the fact that there is a new math in play here that we all implicitly understand, but perhaps laying that out and understanding what the impact of that on the organization truly is important. And it has to do with the fact that the mobile landscape in your organization is much more complex than compared to traditional applications. And it has to do with the fact that there's a higher number of devices you're supporting. The number of supported operating systems on those devices that you have to be able to be mindful of is much, much higher than what we have been used to in the past. The operating system updates put out by the device makers is also something that organizations don't have control over, but you can be aware of what those operating system release cycles are, and if you pay close attention to those have now settled into a cadence that is easy to understand. Likewise, the number of apps in an organization has a big impact on it. The greater the number of applications, the greater the complexity of the testing effort in the center of excellence or in the testing team. Likewise, the number of test cases per app is a big factor, and the app release frequency. App releases are much more frequent. The rate of change there is much, much higher than what organizations are used to dealing with in the past. And so recognizing this fact is an important element. And I think this goes back to one of those realities where we talked about there's just not enough time to test all of what's in your portfolio, and this equation sort of makes it very, very clear. And so in making your case for what is the scope of the testing portfolio that you have to go after, exercises like this where you understand your portfolio is very, very important. The next consideration that is important to talk about also is that associated with testing automation, there is this consideration that by bringing in a testing automation tool, you're going to be able to solve all of what we have talked about so far, which is the effort is massive, and if I put in a testing automation tool, magically I'm going to be able to get results that will actually solve my problem. We think it's a little bit different than that, and we'd like to set expectations in our engagements with our customers to go through a process similar to this, which helps establish a little bit of a scope up front in the first step, which is where we typically go through a scoping and planning exercise using our mobile testing automation Kickstart. And that process uses a lot of the tools that I've been showcasing a little bit as we've gone through the various different considerations. It helps prioritize which apps to go after. It helps understand which test cases within an app are candidates for automation, and comes out with the effort associated with the automation effort. And then goes, before you start to go build the test cases, it goes into the setup and initiation piece, which, as I will talk about in a little bit here, goes through a design process to say, don't just start building automation scripts. Spend some time thinking about how do you want to design your regression suite. What are some of the considerations that are important in the design that have to be accounted for, so that as ongoing updates to the app happen, you're not going and having to change these automation scripts one-off. And that typically is a 1 to 2 month exercise. We do that using our mobile test service pack. And we find that in some cases, companies have gone through, even if they've gone through a scoping exercise, oftentimes they'll skip step 2, or they will not set expectations internally that only after you go through step 2 will automation start yielding some results in step 3 when you're doing the automation, when you're doing the ongoing testing using automation. So important consideration to keep in mind in setting expectations internally with all stakeholders. The next consideration has to do with the fact that taking the time to design the regression suite is very, very important. I talked about this briefly in the previous consideration. We find a lot of organizations, once they have a testing automation tool, jump right in, and it is, in some cases, very easy to record automated test scripts. And they find very quickly that they end up with a large set of test cases that are automated now, but there's no foundational elements put in place. There's no reusable components that you're using across test scripts. And so at the point of a change, you're having to go back in and having to touch each one of those scripts individually, which actually results in even more time being spent in maintaining the automation scripts than the results you yield in terms of the time savings from automation. So important consideration, and what some of the things there are you have to look for some analysis around each of the apps, as we talked about earlier, but then more importantly, the user stories and test cases. Look for reusable elements where possible, and design the regression suite in a way that there's common components that can be inherited by other test cases. Just jumping in to record scripts without plan, we think, will lead to a lot of rework later on. Very quickly, to sum up, the fifth consideration has to do with the fact that the type of automation tool or the platform that you're selecting has a big impact on what kind of results you might be able to get out of your automation efforts. And this one has to do with the fact that how is your testing organization structured today has a big impact on this. If today you have folks who are primarily testing using manual functional testing efforts, perhaps, you don't want to have to go through a huge training exercise to get them up to speed on this automation platform. And so selecting tools that allow for accommodating multiple device types, can easily run these scripts that you're recording on various different types of devices, and also the ease of use associated with the platform should be such that it can easily accommodate somebody who is not a coder, who's not a programmer, who's not an engineer, who can very quickly learn this, and they can apply their core testing capabilities to the automation discipline. We think that's important in terms of your ramp-up, especially in the early days. But by the same token, we also want to make sure that the testing platform does accommodate deeper level of capabilities, such as being able to write a lower-level code for some of the more complex test scripts that can be accomplished more elegantly if you're able to have a way of being able to programming or to introduce programming into these test scripts as well. And so having that flexibility, we think, is important in selecting the automation platform that you're going to go with. And so those are the 5 considerations I wanted to share, and a lot of this is baked into some of the demo that we will go through today as well as I was pointing out, these are considerations from our engagement with customers, and from that we have actually baked this into a lot of our methodology as well, which I'll talk about a little bit later in the presentation as well. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tom to go through a demo and perhaps maybe highlight some of the features that we were talking about earlier.
Great. Thank you, Sean. This is Tom Savez, and I'm happy to open up my screen and do a demonstration of Touch Test. Touch Test is our functional test automation product, and it makes it very easy to create test that you can run automatically as part of your regression suite, as we spoke about in the slides before. It lets you test against multiple devices simultaneously, so you can test against the latest devices, but also the older devices that your customers would have to make sure that new features that you're putting into your product don't get introduced against older devices. You can make sure that you have compatibility. This is the touch test window. I'm currently looking at the suite of devices that I have accessible to me. We have a resources page that helps you get introduced into the product and has built-in videos and introductions and tutorials. But I'll go ahead and jump into the product. First is that I've got next to me on my desktop a couple of devices. I've got my iPhone 6, and I've got the screen reflected here so that everything I do on the iPhone you're seeing on the display too. And the app that we're going to build a little test for today is just this Southwest travel app. This is an app that lets you check on flight status and check into your flight. And we're going to make an automated test for this, and then we'll run it back and see what the results look like. So first, this device needs to be connected up to the Touch Test Cloud. And to do that, I open up Safari. And Safari, I go to the URL of the Touch Test server that I'm connecting to. And this just lets my phone be connected up to the server in the cloud, and the cloud can now have some control over my phone. It's a two-way communication between the two devices. I'll put this a little bit off the screen so we can watch what I do in Touch Test now. In Touch Test, I will create a test clip. And to do that, I just click the plus button. In the test clip editor, I will choose to record, and I have a couple of different choices of different things I can record. I can record a website if I'm doing a web test. I can record a mobile app, and I can record a mobile web app. But since this is a native application for iOS, I'm going to record a mobile application. Here's that list of devices that you saw before. A couple of them are connected. Most of them are offline. They're not in my test platform right now. I'm going to grab my iPhone 6, and I'm going to test against the Southwest app. Now, I have modified the Southwest app with just a small bit of instrumentation code that lets me control the code, control the application, see what the application is doing, and then run the application again automatically. I choose record, and if you see now here on the screen, the Southwest app has been launched. Anything I do in the application now, let's say I'll click on flight status, because that's something I want to automate. And I'll click on From. The From dialog comes up. I'll just pick a couple of cities. From Austin. I'm just tapping. Now I'll use to. This time I'll do some typing. And notice over on the left side of the screen that everything that I'm doing is being reflected on the test. So I went from Austin. I'll say the flights from Austin to Atlanta. We'll make an automated test case for that. And we'll press Look Up. And so we see the application is, I'm running the application, and everything that I'm doing in the application has been captured. We see that I clicked on a button called Flight Status, then From, I tapped on Austin, I tapped on To, I typed in ATL, and then I tapped Look Up. Now, this is good for just executing an application, but we actually, to be a valid test, we should probably check that some result has been accomplished correctly, just as we would if we were looking at the screen. So we'll take this last step, and we want to make sure that something is present on the screen. So I'm going to click the check mark, which is to check something in the test. We have a whole list of different things we can check in the application. We can check that an element is present. We can see what color it is, etc. I'm just going to be looking to see if an element is present, and I'm specifically going to look for a text element. Now, I could try and type in the locator of that element on the screen if I knew the object hierarchy, what the object ID was, things that were related in the code of the element, but I don't know those things, so I'm going to click this button here, which is an element locator, and I'm going to go back to the device, and we will see the screen goes gray, and a blue box appears around it, which tells me that I'm in the element locator mode. And now anything I tap on the screen of my iPhone, any element, I see the IDs, the locators for any of these objects on the screen. So to create a test for one of these objects being present, I just need to pick the one that I want to test for. And I'm going to say that flight 472, because that's always a flight that's available between Austin and Atlanta. And we see now what the locator fields are for this, what the way that the the touch test will find this element in the object hierarchy. To choose this one, you see there's a little blue circle. I'll just tap on it. And now the data about that element has been transferred over to touch test. And we see that it was object ID number 472 with 472 text. So now that is my test. It's a pretty simple test. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. And we'll save it. And we'll just give it a name, very simple name, Southwest Test Clip. And now to execute this test, it's pretty simple. I just pull down the play button and say, let's play this in a test composition. And we'll bring the iPhone 6 back up on the display. And now the test is executing. Southwest was just launched. We also see a little blue hint located, hint on the screen that tells what the application is looking for. And let's see. Looks like the test might be stalled a little bit. All right. That one timed out. I think we have a Wi-Fi issue here in the possibly in the office. I'll just go ahead and try and run that one again. One thing we do find in building tests is that sometimes the application is, the test needs to have a check to see that the application is actually ready for the next step of the test, as the test server can run faster than the fastest application. So I'm going to go ahead and see if I can build that test again really quickly because it is so fast to build it. But you do need to sometimes put in just a wait to see that the application is in the state that it's ready, that the test is ready to continue. Just part of developing a test and testing your test, of course. Let's go ahead. And I'm actually going to switch it to a different device that I have. I also have an iPad sitting on the desktop next to me, and we'll give it a try on that one. And here's my iPad. And we'll do the same thing. Flight status, and we'll do a quick test from Austin again to this one. We'll just do tapping, and we'll look that up. And we'll just stop it there. Run that. Save it away. Bring the display back up. Still connecting up the device. The application is launched automatically. There we go, continue as guest. There we go. Looking for the flight status. All right, well, I'm going to have to do a little bit more editing on my test in this next one, which I can do. But a couple of things I want to show you about the test while they're running is that even for, obviously this is a test that failed, so part of our automation suite we would need to reflect on, look at whether the application had failed or whether the test had failed. But we do get some great data back during the test, such as the value of the CPU load during the test to see whether this is an application that is burning through the CPU and is one that's going to be affecting positively or negatively the user's experience by using their CPU. The more CPU that is used during an application's execution, the more the battery is used. Similarly, how much memory is used during a test, during the execution of an application. If it's a typical run of an application and you see that the application is running out of memory, you might want to be looking at how your application is using memory. Maybe the application has a memory leak in it, and this is a great way to find it. Likewise, battery load. How much is the battery being used during a test? If the battery is running out during a test, that means that your users are going to have their battery impacted by the execution of the application, just as it is during your test. And if the test is a typical use of your application and the battery runs out, that means your application is going to have a poor user experience in using up the customer's battery. And likewise, last field over here, bytes sent and received. If a lot of bytes are sent and received by your application, that might be using up quite a bit of your customer's data plan, and that would be a concern to your customer. If it's going to use up all of the data in their plan, they're not going to be very happy when they get a bill from their mobile carrier or your application. If it's always used in-house and Wi-Fi, that might not be such a concern. But having these performance characteristics of your application through your typical test procedures and your typical uses of your application gives you valuable data about how your customer's experience will be with the application. Now, as I said, touch test does let you easily make a test available to run on multiple devices. As easily as I ran this on just one device, the iPad or the iPhone, I can customize this test to run on multiple devices. But with that, the test not being quite ready to run, I won't go ahead and run that on two. But I'll show you just how easy it is to do that just in the window here, just so you can see where I have this device set up for one this test set up for one device. I can say, let's duplicate this test, and now we'll go ahead and run it on a second connected device, the iPhone, and just that easily, the test can now run on two devices. So it's pretty easy to take a test, build it for one device, run it for two devices, and because the tests are using the IDs of the application and not the specific pixel locations of the application's elements, the test will run pretty successfully across multiple devices as long as the IDs are the same in the different versions of the application. So you can see I quickly got results across two devices here, an iPad and an iPhone Plus, 6 Plus. So we can collect this data across multiple devices, 5, 10, 15, 25, whatever the number of devices that are needed in your regression test suite. The test will run simultaneously and in parallel, in separate tracks, so that if one device is slower or one device is faster, you'll still see the results correctly reflected across devices, even if their speeds are not identical. So that was a quick look inside of Touch Test, how to build a test graphically using the clip editor, how to set it up as a composition, and then how to run it against different devices at the same time, and how to analyze the results and looking at the performance characteristics. With that, I'll hand it back to Shahab, and I'll see him.
That's great. Thank you, Tom. And I know there's some questions coming in as well, and Danielle will be going through those later as well. So please keep those coming. Just to talk a little bit about from the 5 key considerations that we talked about, as well as some of the realities. Looking at what our customers have been dealing with and what some of the things we have done in our customer base, I thought it would be worthwhile to go through our testing services portfolio and what SOSTA and Propelix offer to address some of the challenges that our companies that we're dealing with are facing. We have the first one is a mobile testing readiness kickstart. And this one focuses, it's a kickstart that is very, very quick, typically a 3 to 4 week exercise that goes through and helps you understand the readiness for your organization to be able to take on mobile testing. It looks at all aspects related to the skills, competencies, your testing methods as they exist today, your testing tools, and as well as your capacity issues if there are any. And gives you a roadmap to be able to proceed with your mobile testing efforts. And we find typically for organizations that have already recognized that there is a need for a good testing strategy before they'll be able to overcome their mobile testing challenges, that Kickstart is very, very relevant. The second one that is related somewhat to the content that we went over today related to testing automation is a Kickstart specifically to help you get going with your testing automation efforts. If you have a testing if you have a set of test cases associated with an app that you think is a candidate for automation, perhaps maybe going through and looking at touch test as an option to be able to help build those test cases, being able to go through the exercise where you would use the framework that helps you prioritize which test cases are good candidates for automation, and then being able to create those test cases just as Tom went through, helping you think through some best practices in the use of touch test is all included in that mobile test automation kickstart. And likewise, that's no more than a 5 to 10 day exercise So it gives you a very good handle on what automation requires and what should be your plan around one app or multiple apps when it comes to automation. We do offer a lot of capabilities by way of adding capacity to your organization. We do that by way of the mobile testing as a managed service, in which in those cases we're able to just become an extension of your organization by taking over your mobile testing efforts, whether automated or manual. And at a later stage, you're able to obviously bring those in-house if needed. And the last and not least is to do with the SOSTA touch test training and advisory services. For many of our shared customers between SOSTA and Propelix, we continue to stay involved in helping fine-tune some of their automation testing efforts, as well as helping grow the number of users internally who are trained in SOSTA touch test. And so we do offer those capabilities as well. I wanted to introduce a little bit more background on that testing automation Kickstarter I talked about. As I said, it's a 5 to 10 day exercise. Starts off with just looking at doing some direction setting where we're looking at, for your app, what are the supported operating systems? What are the different types of apps that you have in-house? Do you have user stories documented? Do you have test cases against those user stories put together? Do you have any testing tools that you're looking to leverage? Which pieces are missing from your suite of testing tools? Looking at your device types that are part of your corporate-owned devices, BYOD, consumer devices that you're launching these applications on, and then understanding your release frequency. From that, we are able to create a mobile test automation roadmap, and that automation roadmap looks a little bit like that picture I shared with you earlier, where you're able to go through some level of prioritization on the apps as well as the test cases within the apps. It's a very quick process. We like to be able to create a very actionable roadmap out of that, and in 5 to 10 days, we're able to typically do that depending on the size of your app portfolio. After that, we typically suggest a 1 to 2 month exercise where we go through automated testing starter packs, and these are these are typically 30 days long, hence you can buy 1 or 2 of these depending on your readiness to be able to proceed with automation. And then from there, we transition into more of the ongoing testing efforts, which can be either structured as a managed service, or we can structure it any other way that is suitable for the engagement. So that sort of sums up some of the methodologies that we have been successful with.